الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله فإن الله تعالى مع المتقين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us that there may be things that are disliked to us, things that we dislike, things that perhaps we hate, things that we do not want to do, that we do not want to engage in, things that we do not want to happen, but they are better for us. And there may be things that we dislike that are better for us in this life, and they will lead to a better life for us in the next life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us there are things that we may like, that we may love, that we may want, that we may desire, and they are bad for us. They will lead us to bad places in this life and the next life. They are not healthy for us, for our dunya nor for our akhirah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah knows and we as His creation do not know. And this ayah, it makes up a very important part of the foundations of living a goodly life, living a balanced life, living a content life. How so? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us there are things which are bad for you, but you may want them and like them and desire them. And there are things which are good for you that you may not want, you may not like, and you may not desire. And if you look at the halal and the haram, perhaps you will find an element of this in the halal and the haram. Especially for those that enter into Islam and they've lived an adult life prior to Islam wherein they engage in their desires. They drink what they would like to drink, eat what they would like to eat, and they have relationships with who they would like to have relationships with. They make money in a way that they would like to make money without giving thought to whether or not it's good for them, i.e. in this life and the next. And for those that perhaps lived a life wherein it would be deemed to be an ignorant life, a life of jahiliyyah, where they would engage in whatever they wanted to engage in because it made them feel good. They liked it, they desired it, without giving reflection or thought to where this particular thing will lead them to. If we were to ask an alcoholic what led him to the end place that we find him in today, he will say, in brief, following desires. If we were to ask the drug addict that's addicted to heavy drugs and cannot come off them by himself, what led you to this place that you find yourself in today? In brief, he would say, desires, wants, likes. Without understanding, perhaps without reflecting on where these things will lead them to. And perhaps that's a simplification. Why? Because a man is a product of his environment. And at times of difficulty, if a person does not have guidance and a framework, it's very easy to look for escape in the wrong things. And that's a part of the blessing that we have a framework of guidance. We have a framework of guidance. We know what is right from wrong. Even if we don't have parents that can tell us or elders that can guide us, we have the Quran we can refer back to and we should attach ourselves to. And for young men and for young women that were perhaps raised without those individuals that they can ask, it's important that they become those people that can be asked for the next generation. But going back to the point, if you were to ask a person who can no longer take care of his own pocket, why? Because every time he has money, he spends it on gambling. He gambles away everything he owns. If you were to ask him, what led you to this point you find yourself in now? He will say, in brief, following my desires, following my wants, my likes, without understanding or without reflection for where this will lead him to. If you were to ask the fatherless child, and the fatherless child had the ability to articulate the problem that he finds himself in, where did this come from? He will perhaps say, a father or a mother who engaged in what they wanted to engage in, following their desires without thinking about the end result. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a framework. Why? Because it's better for us in this life and the next life. Halal is halal because it's good for us in this life and in the next life. Haram is haram because it's bad for us in this life and in the next life. And we live in a society, as has been said so many times, where we can witness with our own eyes and hear with our own ears the result of not having a God-given framework that is being followed on an individual and a collective basis. We step outside and we see the problems that society is facing, that individuals are facing. So we see the reality, the need to have revelation, to have guidance, to have direction, to have the ability to know what is right and what is wrong in a society that has begun to question the very basis and foundation of right and wrong. This ayah can be applied in such a manner. Likewise, this ayah can be applied to the qadr. To the qadr. When a person loses their health, they don't want to lose their health. But Allah knows that loss of health in that particular moment for that particular person is better for them. It's better for them. A person might find himself to be poor, and they want to be rich. But Allah knows for that person, in that particular time, due to the wisdom that only He has, it's better for that person to be poor. A person may want something and they cannot acquire it. The road is blocked, and perhaps they feel an element of grief or sadness. They feel like they've been prevented. But the reality is, as long as the person believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they've been protected. Not prevented, but protected. How many roads seem good, but they end up in disaster? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevents us from entering those roads in the first place with His qadr. And we have stories, examples of this in the Quran. A person may really want something, but it's bad for them, Allah protects them. And a person may really not want something, may really dislike something, but Allah gives it to them. Why? Because it's good for them. And as a simple example, when a child becomes sick and the parent tries to give the child the medicine, the child doesn't want to take the medicine. But the parent insists. Why? Because the parent knows in order for the child to get better, they have to take the medicine, no matter how bitter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala nurtures us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala nurtures us as individuals and as a collective. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test a person in that which he needs to be tested in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise a person's status through tests. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this in the Quran, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, a verse which has been used so many times. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. That we are going to trial you and test you. That's this life, trial and test. Sabr, ibtila, dunya. It's the lowest of life. This place, it's a low place. It's a place to be tested. It's a place to face difficulty. And the key ingredient to that is what? Sabr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. O you who believe, you individual, you collective, who have faith, who has faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who wants the next life, who believes in Allah, who believes in Allah's wisdom, who believes in Allah's decree, who believes in Allah's strength, who believes in Allah's promises, who believes in Allah's angels, who believes in paradise, who believes in hellfire, who has belief. Seek aid in your affairs through two things, as-sabr and as-salah. Patience and salah, prayer. Sabr, patience. Some of the ulama say siyam. Why? Because siyam leads to sabr. In order to fast, you have to be patient. And salah, sila, a connection with your Lord. Be patient in your affair and connect to your Lord during your trial and your tribulation. What's the end result? Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with the people of patience. Allah is with the people of patience. One of the sahabiyat, she was afflicted with a trial, the loss of a child. And the Prophet ﷺ came to her to comfort her. And she reacted in a way which was indicative of, to a degree, not being as patient as she should have been. And she left. And someone informed her that was the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. So she went to apologize. And he said to her, الصبر في بداية الأمر أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. He said that patience is in the beginning of an affair. When a trial or tribulation afflicts us, to be patient, to have patience and forbearance. And when a person has patience and forbearance, that's when Allah's aid is given to the person. Allah sends His aid. When a person is poor and they cannot afford to feed themselves, to feed their family, they cannot afford to pay the bills, to be patient. Patient in that situation. And Allah's aid will come. Why? Because that's a means of acquiring Allah's aid. Allah has made patience a means of acquiring His aid. It's a sabab. The same way that wearing a coat to protect myself from the rain is a means of protection, being patient in difficulty is a means of acquiring Allah's aid and help. What does it mean to be patient in a calamity? It means to continue to be a good person, to not resort to haram, to not develop ill thoughts of Allah, of others, etc., to not be ungrateful, to try to remind myself of the blessings that I have. It's very easy during a difficult time to resort to the haram. I'm broke, I need money. I'll sell this. I'll rob this person. I'll cheat that person. And I can very easily convince myself that it's okay and develop an entitlement mentality, self-entitled. I deserve. I should have. Why don't I have? This person has. I want. And all of that comes from shaitan. It comes from shaitan. Whatever I have is what I deserve in the moment that I have it. If I'm not rich right now, then I don't deserve to be rich. Why? Because that's what Allah has decreed for me. And if I am rich, in the moment that I'm rich, that's what I deserve because Allah has decreed it for me. If I'm sick, I don't deserve to be healthy. If I'm healthy, I don't deserve to be sick. Why? Because all of it is the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if I tell myself I deserve anything other than what I have in this moment, I'm being ungrateful. I am being ungrateful. Why? Because it's Allah's qadr. Allah has determined and Allah has decreed. Does that mean that I cannot endeavor to change my circumstance? Does it mean that if I'm sick, I have to say, no, I'm not going to have medicine? Why? Because Allah has decreed sickness for me? No. I can seek a realistic means of change. I can seek a permissible means of change. I can go outside and try to look for work. I can try to sell. I can try to trade. I can try to develop my health. I can try to develop myself. I can seek education. I can seek direction, guidance. I can make dua. I can ask Allah. But I have to realize that what I have is what I deserve. That's a part of patience, sabr. And it's attributed to Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu ta'ala. He said, if I wake up in the morning and one of my limbs is missing, I won't complain. I'll be pleased with that. Why? Because it's Allah that has decreed for my limb to go. This is a part of the test. And we have to remind ourselves, because we live in a society that tells us you should have, you deserve, you need, you should want, you should endeavor for. And that comes from shaitan. That comes from a framework where the person, the collective, the individual has no belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qadr. That's a reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اصْبِرُوا وَصَابِرُوا وَرَابِطُوا وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Allah tells us to have patience and to force ourselves to have patience. Why? There is no sabr without forcing ourselves to have sabr. Patience is not something that a person can have without being tested and developing patience. Just as a person cannot have, to some extent, abnormally strong frame, unless they train themselves to have that frame. A person cannot have patience unless they are trialed and put to test. A person, if they want to develop strength which is above average, they have to train. Likewise, if a person has patience which is above average, they are going to be tested. And everyone is tested in this life. Everyone. And that's one of the benefits of fasting every single year, because it teaches us patience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recharges our batteries, recharges our ability to say no to the self. That's what sabr is. Sabr is the ability to say no, the ability to force oneself to stay and remain seated when the self wants to get up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اصْبِرُوا وَصَابِرُوا وَرَابِطُوا. And ribat is to guard the frontier, to stand guard and to stand watch, and to protect a land from its enemies. But likewise, we have to be patient with ourselves, and we have to engage in a form of ribat with the self. We have to stand guard and protect ourselves from our enemies. Who are our enemies? Ash-shaytan and an-nafs. Iblis, the devil himself, and the inner self. The inner self is just as much an enemy as shaitan is, Iblis is. And Iblis enters us through our nafs. Iblis tempts us through that which we have within us. For some, it may be a love of money. For others, a love of fame. For others, a love of women. For others, a love of whatever it may be. Food, etc. Clothing. It could be anything. Shaitan comes to us through that which we love and tries to pull us through our desires. And so we have to be on guard. We have to guard the frontier, the internal frontier. That requires patience. And the Prophet ﷺ, he gave glad tidings to the patient. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before him gave glad tidings to the patient. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Give glad tidings to the patient. What does that mean? It means this person is going to receive the good of this life and the good of the next life. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Those who went afflicted, they say simply, we are from Allah, we belong to Allah, and to Him we return. That which I have is not mine. The clothes I wear on my back are not actually my clothes. They don't come with me into the next life. They were not on my back when I was born. Another man will take them when I pass away. Or they'll decompose or be burnt, whatever the case. They're not mine. The money I have in my bank account, the money I have in my pocket is not mine. The vehicle that I use, whether a car, a bike, a bus, a train, these things don't belong to me. The house that I currently occupy doesn't belong to me. Tomorrow, someone else will occupy it in my place. The food I eat, it's not mine. The children that I have, I don't own them. They were given to me by Allah and they will return to Allah, and Allah will do with my children what Allah pleases. Nothing that I have belongs to me, including my own self. I belong to Allah. My body is temporarily with me, but reality is it belongs to Allah. It was given to me by Allah, and Allah has given me a guideline. Allah has given me conditions. Treat your body in this way. Consume these things. Don't consume these things. Do this with your body. Don't do that with your body, etc. The people of taqwa, the people of patience, they realize this. And so when a calamity afflicts them, they say, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to Allah in the first place, and to Him we're going to return. My money, it's no longer with me, it belongs to Allah anyway. And Allah, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. The affair of the believer, all of it is good. إِنْ أَصَابَهُ سَرَّاء شَكَرْ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. If he is given good, he is a person of gratitude. He turns to Allah and he remembers that it came from Allah. And so it's good for him. It's written on his scale of good deeds. وَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ ضَرَّاء صَبَرْ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. And if he is afflicted with a calamity, he's patient. So it's good for him. Why? Because patience leads to a person's status being raised in this life and the next. And Umar radiallahu anhu, he said something which has been mentioned so many times, that the mu'min should be in one of two states, sabiran or shakiran. That a person is either in a circumstance wherein they have to be patient, or a circumstance wherein they have to be grateful. When I say they have to be, meaning if they are not, there is a consequence. If I have blessings, then I should be grateful to Allah for those blessings. Allah's name should be on my tongue. I should remind myself, everything I have came from Him. It's all His blessing. Everything I am because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me and made me. And if I am being afflicted, if I'm facing a calamity, I have to be patient. So we should look at ourselves and ask, right now, should I be a person of patience or a person of gratitude? And of course, there are going to be multiple areas in my life. Financially, perhaps, I have to be patient. But physically, I have to be grateful. Circumstantially, perhaps, when looking at it holistically, I should be grateful, etc. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Alhamdulillah wahdahu salawatu rabbi wa salamuhu ala Ashraf al-anbiya'i wa man tabi'ahu wa ba'd. If we look to the best of examples, the walking Quran, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, we will find that his entire life was a life of patience and gratitude. Patience and gratitude. When the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam had wealth, he gave gratitude. When he did not have wealth, he was patient. He didn't complain. The Prophet ﷺ, when he faced defeat, he was patient. And patience in defeat means turning back to Allah. And when the Prophet ﷺ was given victory, he was grateful. The Prophet ﷺ and his mission after receiving prophethood, after receiving revelation, went on for 20 plus years. 20 years or so. And during that time, the Prophet ﷺ was patient with his people, patient with his neighbors, patient with his companions. And toward the end of his life, when the Prophet ﷺ was given victory in Mecca and he entered Mecca with his head down in a state of gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not with his head up in a state of pride, but with his head down in a state of gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was patient for the duration of his mission, and he was grateful when his mission came to somewhat of a conclusion. And of course, the mission continued even after the victory in Mecca. But that was, perhaps you can say, the defining moment in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And so for us in our lives as individuals, and in our lives as a collective, as an ummah, we have to remind ourselves to be patient. Remind ourselves to be patient. And the best way to remind ourselves to be patient is to remind ourselves that this life is short. This life is short. It doesn't last for very long. And we don't know how long it's actually going to last. For some of us, perhaps into old age. For some, perhaps into mid-ages. For others, perhaps only into youth. It's short and it's a test. And take it day by day, being patient with what I have. Can I try to change my circumstance? Yes. But in a way which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And ultimately, we will leave this life. And if we have been patient, when we leave this life, it will be a relief. Why? Because we're leaving the trials and the tribulations and the difficulties of the dunya, and we're going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're going to that everlasting reward, paradise. That's who we want to be. Just as we're patient in Ramadan, and we enjoy breaking our fast in the evening, we show patience for our life in this dunya, and we will enjoy breaking our fast from this life when we transition into the next life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the patient. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وارض اللهم عن أبي بكر وعن عمر وعن عثمان وعن علي وعن سائر الصحابة أجمعين اللهم تب علينا واعف عنا واجعلنا من الصابرين لك يا رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة.